Hey, hope you're doing well. Andy here from Drive Steady, and in this video I'm reviewing a BMW Z4 M40i, a car that's fast, looks cool, and delivers a convertible top-down driving experience. Now, the Z4 has been out since 2002, and it succeeded the wildly iconic and popular BMW Z3. It's hard to imagine that the Z4 is now in its third generation, this one codenamed G29. It's an all-new design, and for the first time ever, it's wearing the M40 nameplate. Now, if you're familiar with BMW and the M badge, they typically hold that for the highest trim levels, such as the M3, the M4, the M5, and on and on. But they've kind of diluted it recently, and you're seeing that nameplate in places where you typically don't. As a result, you've got cars like this one, the Z4 M40i, and in the 5 Series, the M550. They've even got it in SUVs, the X7 M50i. So you get the idea. The purists don't like it, the old school BMW guys and gals don't like it, but say what you want, it's a more economical entry to the M brand for everyone. So in this video, I'm going to give you an overview of the exterior, interior, and driving characteristics of this Z4 M40i and share my thoughts on if that M badge is just for show or if it's the real deal. All right, let's start off the review by looking at the exterior, more specifically with the hood. Now, there's 3 things that I really think are interesting about this hood. The first thing is the cuts. There are 2 sphere-like shapes that start at the front of the hood and go towards the end. And I'd never really noticed in pictures, and I hadn't really seen it in any other BMW this way. So it's really cool. Next is the BMW started to do like this flat front of the hood, for the lack of a better term. Typically what I'm used to is you've got the kidney grills integrated into the hood. My E46 M3 is like that. When I lift the hood up, the kidney grills go up with it. But that's just another thing I noticed here. And separately, the hood around the headlights, because these headlights are really interestingly shaped, which I will get to here in a second, the hood is required to be cut in this really obscure way. I don't know, it looks good. It's just something that I noticed immediately right when I saw the Z4 from the front end. Now let's talk about the rest of the front end. You've got the BMW logo here front and center, and obviously let's talk about the kidney grills, because kidney grills nowadays are the talk of all BMWs. They just keep getting bigger and bigger and taller and wider, and people are just wondering when that's going to stop. But I'm glad to see that in this Z4 they're proportional to the front end of the car. They're kind of short, but they're long horizontally, which matches the nature of the Z4. It's a low, wide car. So it's really cool looking, and as a part of the M40 package, they're painted in this silver bronze color. But if you don't like that, you can have them painted in black. Next, let's move on to the headlights. Now, these headlights are actually really cool looking. The headlight is actually like nothing you see in any other BMW. It's got a stacked running lamp design. They're hexagonal shaped, they're LED, and they look absolutely fantastic in the daylight or at night. They're just spot on. Then you've got the BMW LED insignia here, which represents the headlight. So overall, I do think the headlight is one of the stronger design cues on the Z4. Moving further down, now let's talk about the lower bumper of the M40i. Now, because this has the M badge, it does have a more aggressive front spoiler, and it is flanking with 2 air skirts in the center section here, and I'm glad to say they're real air vents. They are allowing air through, and just in general, I like this front end design. It's very clean, it's not overly done, but it's functional in that all 3 inlets are allowing air through. All right, so now let's talk about the side profile of the Z4. And being that this is a 2-door convertible, it's kind of difficult to make sure that the proportions are looking right. Now, what I mean by that is typically you see cars where they're too front heavy or they're too rear heavy or the cabin is too far back. But in the Z4, I'm glad to see that it's proportionally balanced. The hood isn't too long compared to the rest of the car. The back end is equally proportioned, and the cabin is a little rear biased, but it's not so far back to where you're feeling like the hood is stretched so far in front of you. Much like a Viper or even the C7 and prior generations of the Corvette. This is not really going to give you that type of visibility or proportional design. Next, from the side, I really like the way BMW has done the side sills. They extend out very nicely. They're aggressive. They've kind of got like these two fins. On a black colored car, they don't stand out very much, but on different colors of the Z4, they stand out very nicely and kind of give it a wider looking front end. Okay, so now let's talk about the wheels, but before I get to that, because this is an M40i, you get the M-Tune sport suspension. In addition to that, you get a limited slip differential. Both of these things come standard on this trim level. Now let's actually get to the wheels. On the M40i, the standard wheels are 18 inches, but these are the upgraded ones. They're painted in all black. They're 19 by 9 in the front and 19 by 10 in the rear. So it's a pretty substantial wheel. In addition to that, as a part of the M40 package, you get the M Sport brakes, which are painted in this infamous blue color, and they look really good. If you wanted, you can have these painted red for an additional $600. Inside, the brake caliper is biting onto a 13.7-inch rotor in the front and 13.5-inch rotor in the rear. I forgot to mention, you also get M Sport brakes in the rear, so it's nice that BMW is not cheaping out and skipping the rear brakes. And while we're on the topic of not cheaping out, BMW is also not skipping out on the tires they're putting on this M40i. You've got Michelin Pilot Sport tires. These are the same tires I have on my Shelby GT350. They're 255/35 up front and 275/35 in the rear. So it's another sign that BMW is taking the M badge seriously. Alright, so since we're on the side profile, I might as well show you how the convertible top operates. It's a soft top, and I'm glad to see that it's a soft top and not a hard top, because the hard top just adds so much weight to the convertible, already being heavy in and of its own when you compare it to a coupe. Alright, so the way the convertible top operates, there's a button right here underneath the shifter to the right of the parking brake. You push that and the convertible top begins to open. So it takes 10 seconds for the top from its closed position to get to its open position, and same goes for the other way around. And once you've got it down, this is what it looks like. And as far as what speed you can lower the roof at, it's up to 30 miles an hour. So it's actually pretty good. You don't really have to slow down or pull over in order to put the top down. Another interesting thing about the top is that you have the ability to lower it and close it using the key fob. So basically, to lower it from a closed position, you hold the button to unlock the doors, and as you continuously hold that, the windows will roll down and the convertible top also closes. Now, you close the car and you walk away and you're like, oh shoot, I forgot to close my convertible top. You don't have to come back into the car. You hold the lock button on the key fob, you keep holding it, the whole thing closes again, your windows close, and the doors lock. So it's actually really clever the way they've designed that. Alright, so now we're on the rear end of the Z4 and I've got the top down. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is the integrated spoiler. Now, for me, as an old school BMW fan, as an old school BMW owner, I always remember the CSL trunk in the E46 M3. And for some reason, that is the coolest looking trunk ever. And I see a lot of resemblance. There's an integrated spoiler here in the Z4 and it flows in really nicely. And it's kind of got that CSL style spoiler. So it's actually really cool. Now let's talk about the trunk. So the trunk can be opened in 3 different ways. There's a button on the inside, there's a button on the key, there's obviously as typically seen, there's a pad right here that you push on and that opens up. And I'm surprised to say that there's plenty of room in the trunk for, I would say, at least 2 larger size suitcases. So this is very adequate trunk space if you wanted to vacation in this, get on a weekend getaway. And the one thing that's even more surprising is with the top up or the top down, you get the same amount of trunk room. So you're not sacrificing anything with having the convertible top. That's really, really good. Closing it is just as simple as that. Now let's move on to the badging. So there's the BMW badge here, flanked to the right with that M logo by the 40i, and then separately you have a Z4 logo. So it's kind of busy back here. I can see where some people wouldn't like it because there's too much badging, and me typically, I don't like too much badging, but anyway, there is badges on both sides of the BMW logo, and actually it looks like this Z4 font is different than what you get in the M40i over there on the other side. Next, let's move on to these tail lights. These tail lights are actually really cool. They look very much so like what you get in a 8 Series. The LED beam inside there is a hockey stick design. It looks beautiful at night. It's just really nice, actually, is really all I've got to say. And then let's move on to the rest of the rear end. It's very angular, actually. There's a lot of cuts and swoops and things. You've got 2 side scoops here, which are fake. They're not functional. There is no air coming out of either one of these things. The diffuser is 2-sectional. It's not very aggressive and it's not overly done. And I think it's suitable to what you're getting here in the Z4 package. And then you have dual exit exhausts, which are painted black. They look really good. They're like a rectangle kind of angle to the right. They're not fully squarish or fully rectangular shaped. And they do have baffles to make the exhaust open and close to make it throatier or quieter. So let's hear what this thing sounds like. Now I've got the hood popped open, and let's talk about what makes this thing go. It's a 3-liter inline 6-cylinder twin scroll turbocharged engine, making 382 horsepower and 369 pounds-feet of torque. This should not be confused by the twin turbo version of this engine, which is found in the M3 and the M4. When I say twin scroll, I don't mean twin turbo. There's 2 scrolls. It's a single turbocharged engine, the one found in this Z4. Beyond that, it's mated to a 8-speed automatic transmission, typical to what you find in most BMWs nowadays. It weighs about 3,450 pounds. It's rear-wheel drive. It has a 50-50 weight distribution. So BMW has all the numbers right. Because this is a 6-cylinder and the weight of this car is relatively light, you get good gas mileage. 24 in the city, 31 in the highway for a combined average of 26 miles per gallon. Now, considering that this car has almost 400 horsepower and above 350 foot-pounds of torque, you see some of the benefits of having a 6-cylinder engine versus an 8-cylinder engine. The weight is obviously less and the fuel efficiency is obviously going to be better in those situations. So beyond that, let's talk about underneath this hood, or maybe just the design element. Once you look at this 6-cylinder engine, you've got this big plastic piece, and they want you to know you're driving an M performance car. You've got an M badge. So they say that on this piece of plastic here, it looks like there's some carbon fiber there, but overall it's a nicely tidied up and closed up engine. You don't really see anything. The 6-cylinder, inline 6-cylinder is not really exposed. There are these two strut bars that are mounted across more on the front end of the car that provide structural rigidity. But like I said, overall, it's pretty tidied up. There really isn't much to see as far as a visual spectacle here. It's merely just get down to business up here. All right, so now we're on the interior portion of the review, and one of the things that jumps right out at you is the color of this interior. It's red, quote unquote, but in person it does have some orange hints to it. It's not like a blood really red color. It does suit and contrast the exterior black paint, and I think it works well on this Z4. But beyond that, I'll get a little bit more into the red here in a second, but let's jump right into this interior. So the first thing I want to talk about are these doors. They do have this black and orange contrast to them. They do have a metal piece, so I think it's designed really well. One of the important things is the armrest is not too high, it's not too low, it's in a perfect spot where you can put your elbow there and feel comfortable when you're driving. You have a little side storage area, which is pretty good, not that you're really lacking in storage space. Coming along, inside the interior, the first thing I want to talk about are these seats. These things are one of the most comfortable seats I've sat in quite some time. They actually fit perfectly to my body shape and size. They're adjustable in so many different ways. Everything adjusts. You have a thigh adjuster here, you have the lumbar that adjusts, the bolsters adjust, all the normal backrest going forward and backward, all of that adjusts, and just overall, just for my shape, it fits really nicely. And when the top is closed, I don't feel like I'm sitting too high or I'm sitting too low where my head is hitting the convertible top. So I do feel like I've got an adequate amount of space. I'm 5'10", 5'11", so use that as a gauge for applying it to your own body size. Now, beyond that, let's look at what I've got in front of me. I have a typical BMW steering wheel. It's all leather, no flat bottom like you see in some sports cars. It is very thick and meaty. The 10 and 2 grips are pretty pronounced. You can really put your fingers on there and drive. So typical to BMW, like I mentioned, it is a thick wheel. You do not get a BMW cross stitch pattern. It's just a regular black stitch here. The horn, I'm glad to see, is a leather horn. I kind of rubs me the wrong way when you've got an expensive car and then the horn is plastic, even though I don't really mind it, but considering the price of this car, I'm glad to see that BMW is doing that. Beyond that, you've got a metal piece here that is surrounded by the buttons, and these are multi-control buttons for your radio, your infotainment, to make a call, to end the call, to raise the volume, and obviously your cruise control. Another nice thing that I never really appreciated until I actually used it is the heated steering wheel, and there's this button right here underneath the horn, and again, it's just something that's like an intangible thing that you maybe don't really care for, but when you use it, you're like, oh, that feels really nice. So that's the steering wheel. Now on the steering wheel, you have paddle shifters. These are metal faced, they're plastic back, and they don't really provide any type of experience. They're just regular paddle shifters. They don't make a cool noise or anything like that. Moving beyond that, now let's talk about the gauge cluster. But actually, before I do that, flanking that to the left, you have a little storage compartment here to put your sunglasses. So that's really cool. Above that, you have the light controls. Most people just leave it on auto, and you can see that they have the auto button here in metal to differentiate it from all the other buttons, because people are just going to see auto, push that, and never use this section ever again for their entire ownership. Okay, now let's talk about the gauge cluster. It is a 12-inch gauge cluster. It's all digital, no more analog gauges anywhere. Not your speedometer, not your RPMs, not your gas, nothing. Everything is a digital screen. It's integrated here. It's very crisp. You turn it on, you get the Z4 M40I logo up here at the top. You get the Z4 that comes in. It reminds you of what a cool and M-badged car you're driving. So the graphics are really nice. It's very crisp, as I mentioned. The one weird thing that I noticed is I wasn't able to figure out a way how to get out of the map. The map is just basically always there. So the way the screen is laid out, you have the speed to the left, your RPMs to the right, and in the middle is a map. And I wasn't able to figure out, no matter what I pushed, to get out of that map. I just couldn't figure it out. Beyond that, there are separate items that do come up that give you information about your trip. There's one that's actually really cool. It shows you how much horsepower and torque you're using. But the interesting thing about this one is that the torque is showing in Newton meters instead of what we use to measure torque here in the United States, and that's pounds feet. So I thought that was interesting. I don't know if this is like a European version or something that was imported, but that just stood right out at me. Beyond that, the other interesting thing is the RPM gauge operates in reverse, or in reverse to what you really expect. Typically, you see it hanging this way and then it goes that way. But in this BMW, and in most new BMWs, it starts from the bottom right and it goes this way. So it's really interesting if you're not really used to it. So next, let's move to the right of that. And as far as a design element goes, the infotainment is almost integrated into the dash. It's really nice. Typically you see like this big tablet style thing that sticks out in the middle of the dash, and you're not really getting that here in the Z4. It's very nicely put together. It blends in with the dash, it blends in with the speedometer and the digital gauges as well. So speaking of the infotainment, it's typical BMW, nothing really new here. It does have the latest version of iDrive, which is very smooth. It's still very deep. The menus are very, very deep. But the nice thing is, if you're really just a casual user, you can get familiar with it rather quickly. The things you're going to use the most, like your phone and the radio, and maybe occasionally here and there you use navigation, even though now people just use Google Maps or Apple Maps or whatever, or Waze. But everything that's relatively close that you use on a day-to-day basis is easily available and easy to navigate within the infotainment. Going down from there, you have this really nice metal brushed piece. I mean, everything in here is of good quality. There's nothing that looks cheap, and I'm glad that's the case, because this is an expensive car. Now, moving down from that, you have a very minimalistic climate control system. The climate control system is in this little screen here in the center, and then below that you have the controls for your climate control. So you have the make it hotter and colder, which direction you want it to blow in, how fast you want the fan speed to be, and then you've got auto, your heated seats, your front and rear defrosters. And then on the other side is the passenger side's heated seats, the menu, and the max AC. The one thing I want to talk about these climate control vents, they look really cool. They've kind of got like this spiky metal finish. That looks really nice. I like that touch a lot, actually. Underneath there, you have a little storage area that you open it up and you see a 12-volt outlet, a USB cord, and a wireless charging station. This is really handy, and it fits most larger size phones. In the center here, you've got this controller system for the iDrive and obviously your transmission selector. You've got the traction control on and off button. You've got the parking sensors here, and then the auto on off. When you come to a stoplight, your car turns off. You take your foot off the brake, it turns on. That's the controller there. And then you've got auto hold, which is a really cool feature in BMWs. You put your foot on the brake, and then once you come to a full stop, you can take your foot completely off the brake and the car will not move. Now moving on to the shifter. This thing is short, it's not very bulky. The way you operate it, obviously foot on the brake, and then you pull it all the way down for drive. The shifter doesn't really go anywhere. It's kind of like a joystick style shifter. Now to the right of that, you have the iDrive controller. There are several buttons here. One thing I am going to ding a BMW for in this area is that this is like a plastic piece. All of these buttons are plastic. I just wish that they were in a different type of material, something a little bit more substantial and quality feeling. And one other thing I do wish is that these buttons were individual buttons, but when you push on it, it feels like you're pushing on the entire iDrive controller unit. One thing I did forget to mention about the infotainment system is that it's a touchscreen. So if you don't want to use the iDrive controller, you can touch the screen, and if you don't want to touch the screen, you can use the iDrive controller. Moving all the way behind me as far as storage space goes, there's like a little net here where you can put some stuff, not really much going on. And then after that, there is a center storage area that is a pass-through to the trunk. So if you got something that's a little long in length, you have the ability to pass it through. Overall, it's a really nice, high quality interior. It's not gonna knock your socks off with a whole bunch of luxurious things, but for the price point, I think it's adequate and it's fair value for what you're paying. The interior is not cramped, being that this is a two-seater car. When the top is up, I also don't feel like I'm cramped. I have a good amount of headroom. I sat in the passenger seat and there's an ample amount of room there. So overall, the Z4's interior is a pretty nice place to be. All right, so now it's time to take the Z4 for a drive. But before I do that, just a couple pieces of information. The first thing I like to do is show off the key. That is what it looks like. Nothing really extraordinary. It does have the M logo there, which is still underwhelming, so it's not really that big of a deal. It is mainly plastic. It's only this metal piece here that's something other than plastic. But yeah, disappointing. But anyway, now let's talk about the visibility. I have to say that because this is a roadster style and it does have a longer hood than most normal cars, the visibility is not the best out front. Typically what I'm expecting out of BMW cars is it just to completely fall off and I just see everything down on the road. I'm not saying it's bad, it's just different than what I'm expecting. I do see the hood more than I do in other BMWs that I've driven. Over the shoulder, with the top down, you don't have any issues, but when the top is up, the B pillar, or I guess where the convertible top is, does affect you a little bit. I've found that I do have to crouch a little forward when I'm looking over my shoulder to see everything back there. And then on the passenger side, it's the same. When the top is up, you do have the pillar there for the convertible, the structural piece that is somewhat blocking you, but it's not terrible. The nice thing is that this Z4 has a plethora of safety features. It's truly remarkable how much safety features cars have now. So to combat the blind spot or the over-the-shoulder, I guess, reduced visibility, you have blind spot monitoring. In addition to that, this car has something that I had never felt before. So it has lane tracking. In addition to that, it has the ability to autocorrect. So once you're in a lane and let's say you're floating out, it will automatically move you back into your lane. So that was such a weird phenomenon. It's something I hadn't felt before, but it just goes to show you how far technology has come and how much it has aided with safety. Now, front and rear sensors, backup camera. So I guess you do have a safety net with all of these features to help combat some of the shortcomings of the Z4. Okay, and as far as price goes, the Z4 base price in the 40i trim, $63,000. The way this one is configured is roughly about $67,000 to $68,000. It does have one or two of the options, but it is basically a $70,000 roadster. All right, so that's enough talking. Now let's turn this puppy on and take it for a spin. So foot on the brake, start stop button, fires up. Let's put our seatbelt on. Alrighty, let's make sure the microphone's not blocked. Okay, and I'm gonna leave the top up because it's just more fun that way. Okay, so here we go. As I'm setting off, like I said during the interior portion of the review, the seats are extremely comfortable. This is not a sporty style seat, even though it doesn't feel that way. I hope I'm describing it correctly. It does give a different type of feel. It's very, very comfortable. All right, so I'm going to be able to get onto a straight stretch of road immediately. So I'm going to put it in Sport Plus mode, come to a complete stop, and foot on the gas. Some lag there. There was definitely some lag. I wasn't expecting that, to be honest, but let's try that again. Let's see if it does it again. It lost it a little bit. Yeah, the tail end became a little happy there for a second, but the power is really, really good. The straight six sounds good. The convertible exhaust, oh, can you hear the pops and the bangs? The exhaust does make a lot of noise, actually, and it's pretty good for a forced induction engine. And let's see if I could get the, can you hear that? Let's do it again. Yeah, it does pop and bang. So the engine feels really, really stout, and I'm not surprised. Most BMW inline six-cylinder engines are very stout. They pull very well at all RPMs. I did feel a little bit of a lag as I was doing that initial pull. Let me do it again. Yeah, the back is losing it, but there is some turbo lag. It's either turbo lag.
I'm happy for you.
It's either turbo lag or the throttle response is not that good, because when I floor it, much like the Audi TT that I drove a couple weeks ago, it's lacking a little bit. It just needs some more throttle response, and maybe that's just the nature of the turbo engine. Now, the transmission is actually really, really good. It's an 8-speed automatic. The paddle shifters are immediate. You pull on the paddle, next gear. Downshift, very good. Downshift, let's see one more downshift. Very, very good. It does do its job really well, both on upshifts and on downshifts. So about the pops and bangs that you hear, that only happens in sport mode. If I put it in comfort mode, gas, foot off the gas, no pops and bangs. So it only happens in sport mode. If you're somebody who is totally annoyed by those pops and bangs, just put it in comfort. Don't put it in sport mode. All right, next let's talk about the actual modes themselves. How much of a difference do they make? So I'm in comfort mode. Beyond just it not popping and banging, it's a total daily driver car. It's not something that is very sporty and it's totally rough on the edges. But in this comfort mode, yeah, I'm really impressed. It almost turns into a completely different character of a car. And then when I put it in Eco Pro, obviously Eco Pro is all about fuel efficiency. So I do feel the throttle gets a lot deader, or less sensitive, maybe is the right word. I do still feel like I do have enough power to move along or maybe pass somebody on the highway or even enter the highway. So it does feel dumbed down, but it's not as severe as I've seen it in other BMWs. I'll put it to you that way. Okay, now when I put it in sport, immediately the cracks and the bangs you can hear. The transmission, I definitely feel that it shifts much faster when I'm in sport mode. So let's see if I can get another pull here in sport mode. And the tail comes out. This is a very tail happy car. I feel that the traction is fighting to keep the rear end planted, even though this thing has really wide wheels. So it is, there it is again. Yeah, the tail end comes out in sport mode. It definitely gets livelier. The steering, yeah, it's really good. The power delivery, the throttle response, actually I do feel like it is a little bit better in sport mode, and that's natural to be expected, right? So those are kind of the characters of this car. It does switch whenever you go from comfort to sport to eco mode. All right, now let me put it in comfort and let me give you my overall thoughts of the Z4. Is this an M car? Is this something that represents an M badge? I think it does to a certain extent. Feel-wise, it doesn't feel all the way there like an M car. Like, I drove an M2 competition, and the second I sat in that car, even when I was driving in comfort mode, I could feel that I'm driving a sporty oriented car. But with this, I put it in comfort mode and I feel like I'm driving a 3 Series or a 5 Series. It is very comfortable. So that feel thing isn't almost there. So if I was to say it's probably, I don't know, 2/3 of the way there, it's not all the way there. As far as acceleration and throttle response and the pure speed sensation, I would say it's a little bit closer. If I was gonna say 2/3 of the way as far as feel goes and handling and kind of that razor edge, I would say the speed factor, the thrill that you get with the exhaust and the turbo spooling up and the transmission shifting capabilities, it does get to about, I would say, like 75 or 80% there. Obviously, it doesn't have the amount of horsepower that a M car has, or even the M2 that I drove. I believe this is down about 20 or 30 horsepower to the M2 competition. But it is extremely fast. The fact that the back likes to kick out, even with the traction on, provides a very nice fun factor and cool feeling. As far as daily drivability, I think this is where this car shines and provides its value compared to a true M car. This car is very comfortable. It does have more of a dual purpose nature as opposed to a M2 competition, for example. But I can see why BMW put the M badge on these non-M models, because they're really good at doing this comfort and probably dual nature daily drivability character. So that's my viewpoint. I do think that this is an excellent car. I had very few complaints about it, as you saw during the whole entire portion of the review. But it's very fast. It's very comfortable when you want it to be. It is rather expensive at $70,000, but you are getting a lot of car for your money. It does have a great interior. It does have good, ample trunk space. So I think it's a good car. Anyway, if I didn't answer any of your questions, which I'm sure I have not, if you have any additional ones, put them down in the comments below and I will try and get back to you as quickly as I possibly can. But thank you for watching this video. Until next time, drive steady.